Welcome to the Authors Hour. My name is Fred Zerm, and I'm associated with the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We are a voluntary organization that aims to encourage writers and writing at the institution and beyond by both supporting the activities of the official institution Writers Center and also supplementing them with activities such as this. This is one of our weekly activities. I hope you're able to join us if you're here for a while for some of the others. They include on Sunday evening at 5 o'clock on the second floor in the prose room, we have an open mic open to anyone to read or listen 18 years old or older. Most of us are older. On Tuesdays, right after the Poetry Brown Bag by the Poet of the Week is at 12:15. At about 1:15 up in the poetry room, we offer what's called an informal critique. If you bring some copies, optimistically 10, realistically more like 5 copies of one page of prose or poetry, we'll give you some feedback led by a published writer, usually me, but sometimes someone else. On Thursdays, as you see, we host the Authors Hour. At halftime, I will tell you about some special annual events that we have, but let's get on with the readings. Our first author is Lara Lillibridge. She's the author of Mama, Mama, Only Mama, an irreverent guide for the newly single parents. Also, Girlish, Growing Up in a Lesbian Home. And she's co-editor of the anthology Feminine Rising, Voices of Power and Invisibility. Her essay collection, The Truth About Own Ringing Phones, nice title, will release March 2024 with Unsolicited Press, also a nice title like that. Lara is the interviews editor for Hippocampus Magazine, a creative nonfiction editor for Art of Literary Magazine, and holds an MFA from West Virginia Wesleyan College. Lara Lillibridge.
So I'm going to be reading from Girlish. And Girlish is a little bit of a experimental book. It's written in third person, and the character of myself in the book is called simply Girl. And then that is interrupted with first and second person essays that provide the wiser adult narrator explaining things that the child couldn't know. So I'm going to read a couple of different sections. And the first one is called This Is What You Hear When You Have Lesbian Parents. Oh, and for the record, this takes place like in the early or the late 1970s, early 80s. You hear your parents tell you over and over again how you must not tell anyone. You hear how your stepmother lost her job at the YWCA because she was gay. You hear about Stonewall and Harvey Milk and all the unnamed men and women beaten and sometimes killed by gay bastards. You are told how if your parents lose their job, you will lose the house and you don't want to be homeless. You don't, however, hear the word lesbian. Gay is the word your mother prefers because it sounds more neutral, less specialized. Lesbian is the word she will claim much later. You hear a rock hit your living room window one day, and the whole family goes outside to look at the golf ball-sized hole in the glass. Your stepmother cries, "They threw a rock through our window because we're gay." But you didn't hear any name-calling. You didn't see a note, and you didn't see anyone running away. You live on a busy street and think it was just as likely that a truck picked up the rock as that someone threw it intentionally. This assumption of harassment doesn't sit quite right with you, but you're quick to use the story as an example of how you were persecuted, even though you were never really sure it was true. It was only one way to look at a hole in the window. In 8th grade, you no longer had to keep secret. Somehow the students at school found out and the story was everywhere. Unfortunately, your name starts with L and lesbian pairs with it quite nicely, so you are Lara the lesbian for the rest of the year. Lesbo, lesby, and inexplicably fag are yelled at you in the halls of school. yearbook. You get into a fight with one of your closest friends, and she gets the last shot in, looking at you with hard eyes, and says, maybe you really are a lesbian, just like your mother. Years later, you will forget the reason you were so mad at each other, but her parting words still echo clearly in the cavity of your chest. You are asked, but don't you have a father, over and over? Back in the 70s and 80s, artificial insemination was not an option for gays and lesbians, or anybody. The first test tube baby, as she was called, was not born until 1978, so it was a legitimate question. But your father happened to move across the continent, and not all the cool kids at school believed he even existed. But who is your real mother? This question infuriates your mother. She and your stepmother want to be viewed as equal parents, but they can't erase your father, and you don't want them to. Because not only do you love him, he is your one connection to the straight world. He is the one parent you can talk about without hedging pronouns, and he looks really good on paper. Besides, you want to be clear to all interested parties who you got your DNA from. Any ambiguity about who your mother is diminishes her importance to you. Teenage boys will ask to look in your windows, even though you assure them that nobody wants to see your parents having sex. You compare your stepmother to the androgynous cat on Saturday Night Live, and it's an accurate description, even down to their shared first name. Your cat loves the skit and tries to mimic the character as much as possible. In high school, every single straight man you meet asks, did you ever think you were a lesbian? Or some other permutation of that sentiment. You spend your teen years on a quest to prove heterosexuality. It sounded like, look, I have a boyfriend, I can prove I'm not gay. Of course, you don't tell anyone about the tingling rush you feel when you look at supermodels and Cosmopolitan magazine's covers and checkout line. You push away any thought of women as sexy deep down inside as deep as you possibly can. At night, you're afraid you might wake up and find out you've turned into a lesbian in your sleep. You know that your stepmother knew she was gay since she was 12, and you were relieved when you passed that age and still liked boys. But you also knew your mother didn't turn gay until she was in college and become involved in the feminist movement. College was still a few years away, but you refused to become a feminist just to be safe. You don't want to be the kind of feminist you see, unshaven, man-clothed, angry all the time. You want to be Mrs. Brady, Mrs. Anybody, and you want more than anything to be a head turner. But you also don't see why anyone would think girls aren't as good as boys. Of course girls can be anything they want. Of course they're just as smart. Why can't they be anything they want and still shave their legs and wear high heels and stay home with their children? You want more than anything for your mother to stay home, but she works full time, and that's not something that is ever going to happen in your lifetime. When you tell your stepmother you want to stay home and have children, she follows you into the front yard yelling, "You will not be a housewife, you will be a businesswoman." And you jump over the hedge, the side of the yard, and take off running for high school. You don't know what a businesswoman does exactly, but it sounds pretty boring. You only know how much you yearned for your mother when you were small. You want more than anything to raise children who don't have mother-sized holes in their chest. You hear your stepmother berate your brother over and over like a broken record. If I had been born a man, I could have been a minister or a doctor. If I had been born a man, I would be so much more successful. White men have everything, all the power, all the money, all the good jobs. Look at you. You were born a boy, given every opportunity from birth, and you squander it. You'll never amount to anything. So many words tell you that men are the ruling class, and you want to hitch yourself to a rising star so you don't have to rise yourself. You're not sure you're as smart as your mother thinks you are. If you had to choose between being a man-hater and being soft, feminine, and gentle, those are the only options you think you have, you will teach yourself to be quiet, to be submissive. You will make yourself as beautiful as you can. You will even vote Republican. You will look for a strong man to defend you against everything that scares you. And the next part I want to read is about the big, strong man. So this is later when I was in my 20s and married. And I chose this piece because I wrote it for a workshop in 2009 here at the Literary Arts Center with Margaret Gibson. And I brought 10 pages and we workshopped it here. And I made it into a book. Yeah. Maybe. Does that work? Okay. Sorry about that. So at this point, I'm in my 20s and married unhappily to a biker who was a very big, strong man. Girl stood at the sink in the summer heat, a fly buzzing listlessly around her face. Neither of them able to summon the energy necessary to do much of anything. Crusted, filthy dishes littered the counter that ran the full length of the kitchen. 14 feet of filth, interrupted only by 2 1/2 feet of stainless steel sink. Her gaze traveled over the curtains she had made from Walmart fabric, the stenciling on the walls she had spent hours creating. None of her crafts were very sophisticated or skillfully done, but they were all she could do with the abilities she had and the spare change she crimped from the grocery budget. Pretty was way down on the list of priorities in this house, far below bike parts and dogs and other grimy things. But that day, her pretty things failed to lift her spirit. A droplet of sweat ran down her temple, and she wiped it away with her shoulder. Life hadn't exactly turned out the way she had wanted it to. Girl was poor, depressed, and her muscles always ached. The city house they owned at the edge of the ghetto was falling apart, no matter how much she painted, sewed, and glued things together. Girl waged a constant battle to maintain a semblance of cleanliness. She cleaned up the mud, fur, and animal shit from their 3 dogs and 4 cats. And once she was done, she retrieved the crusted dishes from the living room, emptied the urine-filled Gatorade bottles from the bedroom, picked up the fast food wrappers off the floor where her husband had tossed them, collected the drinking glasses scattered throughout the house, and then did the dishes. Girl looked at the filth, and her heart sank further, her energy leaching out of her. That day, she just couldn't do it. Girl wandered off to see what Samson was doing, leaving the dishes to the flies for a while. She found him in the garage trying to fix the used weed whacker he had just bought. He knew Girl was depressed, knew the house was getting to her, but he just wanted to be left alone with his motorcycle. He was happy with turning a wrench, taking apart motors, and making broken things function again. Samson didn't turn to look at her as he worked, talking out the side of his mouth, his bald head covered in droplets of sweat, smudged with black cream. Go to the mall, he said. Girl left quickly, not bothering to look in the mirror with her hair. While she was at the mall, she fell in love with a jewelry box. It was a small, simple wooden box carved with flowers and curving lines. She didn't buy it. It was $80. She thought about all the things Samson had. 4 Harley Davidsons in the garage, the ridiculous collectible plastic motorcycle models, any rare coin or stamp that caught his eye. The shop he frequented while Girl was at work. He denied himself nothing, and would deny Girl nothing as well, but she knew they were always half a step away from having the utilities shut off, and at least 1 month behind on the mortgage. So she sighed, looked longingly at the box one more time, and then left. As Girl drove down the street, she saw a fire truck parked at the other end. As she drew nearer the house, she could see she would never get through with all the commotion, so she parked halfway down the block. She smelled it before she saw it, and she half walked, half ran, her heart pounding. Girl had known that something would happen sooner or later, and in some ways she was relieved that it finally had. The need for crisis had been building, tension simmering beneath the surface, like an angry pimple that needed to be brought to a head. Girl was just beginning to see that this was their pattern, a mix of bad judgment, high emotions, and an unsettled energy that seemed to draw crises to them, like the unwashed dishes attracted flies. Girl pushed through the crowd of neighbors in front of their house to find her husband sitting on the front step, the firefighters packing up their gear. Whatever had happened, it was over. She hugged Samson, even though he was covered in black soot and sweat, and confirmed the safety of the dogs and cats, and ventured with him into the house as he told her the story. The smell was overwhelming. The stench made Girl's head hurt, and the bile rise in her throat, and it worsened the deeper they went into the house. The house was black, blacker than black, and although it was a bright summer day, they needed a flashlight to see inside. Everything was black, the walls, the windows, the ceiling, every inch of every item that littered the beyond cluttered, filthy home. In some ways, the fire made the house seem neater, as if the fire created the mess and gave reason for its existence. They walked through the living room and down the hall to the kitchen at the back of the house. They passed the office, and girl saw her computer was covered in soot. She was 1 week away from the end of the semester, and she knew all of her final papers were irretrievably lost. They paused by the bathroom, and Samson opened the door. Girl hated the pink-tile bathroom. Ironically, it was untouched by the fire and smoke. They entered the kitchen, and he shone the flashlight over the dishes covering the counter. The ceiling fan had melted into a dangling flower blossom. They walked through the kitchen to the attached garage, and Samson began to talk. The July day was hot and muggy, and Samson kept the garage door closed to keep the sun out. He was paranoid about someone stealing Charlie, so he secured the door with 4 differently keyed locks. While working on the weed whacker, Samson had kicked over the gas can. The gasoline soaked the old piece of carpet he was standing on. He pulled the cord to start the motor, and flames shot out. After that, he decided to remove the fuel filter and see if that helped. The manual says place the weed whacker on the ground and pull the cord, so he placed it on the gasoline-soaked carpet and pulled the cord. Flames shot out again, larger now, because without the filter, the gas glowed faster and the carpet ignited instantly. Thick black smoke quickly filled the house, and Samson couldn't see, so he propped open the side door so that Cap could escape and made his way by field to the front to find the dog. As he walked, he closed every door he passed, thus saving the ugly bathroom. He found the dogs and brought them out with him, carrying the lab who was too scared to follow. As soon as the firemen cleared the house, he went into the garage, found the fuel filter, and threw it in the bushes so no one could blame him for the fire. Girl was struck by the notion that maybe he had done this intentionally. If he had been depressed enough, if he had craved the adrenaline of a disaster so badly, he could have been purposefully careless, acting on a suicidal impulse. Consequences be damned. He ran into the backyard, unable to process what he'd been told. He called Mother first and screamed at her over the long-distance line, demanding to know why she had moved away, demanding that she answer for not being here when Girl needed her the most. They were homeless, with 4 cats, 3 dogs, no credit card, and only a few $100s to make it until the end of the month. Samson still spent much of each day bedridden from a motorcycle accident. Girl didn't get paid time off of work, and she knew there was no way Samson could handle all the necessary details so they could resume their quasi-normal life. Girl sobbed into the phone. "Why aren't you here? Damn you for moving away." Mother just let her rant, not arguing, and then called a friend to come and help Girl. Girl called the insurance company next, surprised she reached an adjuster on a Saturday evening. "Is stupidity covered?" she asked. The adjuster just laughed and assured her they would pay quickly. A Red Cross truck came and gave Girl hotel and restaurant vouchers, as well as phone numbers for boarding kettles for their pets. Samson vomited from the smoke. They gave him oxygen, trying to persuade him to go to the hospital. He refused, preferring Girl to nurse him as he coughed up black chunks of blood and threw up for 3 days straight. The hotel pillows were too soft, and the room smelled of mildew. Samson stayed up, watching TV in bed with the volume on high. Years of riding Harleys had left him with partial hearing loss. The Girl lay on her stomach and prayed for the world to go away. Although she thrived on crisis generally, this was too much. Samson's body smell irritated her, and his loud voice invaded her head. Sleep was her sanctuary, and as much as she craved it, it was not come. It's not all that sad, I promise. Then the last little bit I'm going to read is another, I call Notes from the Forest Wall. This is one of these essays I was telling you about these circles. And I do need to clarify, when I say stepmother, that's my mom's partner. My father and mother divorced when I was 2, and my mom and Pat were together since I was 3 or 4. And they're still together now, 46 years later. Here's something that's hard for me to admit. My stepmother loved me more than just about anyone else in my life. At Christmas this past year, she bought me a hand-blown glass ornament with a tree inside, a melding of tree and sky in one continuous line. It was exactly the sort of thing I loved, more perfectly suited to me than the blue fuzzy loungewear my mother picked out. But my stepmother spelled my name wrong in the gift text. She spelled it Laura. which might be a little fiddly detail, but her misspelling my name has enraged me since I was old enough to read and notice such things. My mother says I'm being silly, we all know she can't spell, and I should get used to it. It would be fine if only she were illiterate, but she has a master's degree. So in my opinion, there's no excuse for misspelling a name that only has 4 letters. Worse, my brother married a woman named Laura, so the U is the only thing that keeps my name my own, as we are both Lillibridges. You see how it always goes astray? I was trying to tell you the story of how my stepmother went out of her way and bought me a beautiful present, but then my bitterness took over. This is often how it is when I try to tell stories about her. I know that she loves me, maybe as much as she loves my mom. When she and my mother broke up for a year, my stepmother still sent me emails, and she bought presents for my kids all by herself, and not only mailed them, but wrapped them, something my grief-wounded mother did not manage to do. I was still her child, even though she walked away from my mother. I always thought if they broke up, I wouldn't miss her. Yet during their separation, I found myself unexpectedly sad. I didn't write her letters or call her on the phone, but every now and then I'd snap a picture and text it to her. When I try to describe her on the page, I think of her walking in dead autumn leaves, listening to me talk. She has always had time to listen to me. I know her words have saved me. She has always felt that no one I have dated was ever good enough for me. She has pulled me out of the fire time after time, and she would do so again if I needed it. She will always tell me I'm better than I think I am. She always tells me how proud she is of me, how much she loves me, how much she loves my children. She will always make time to listen to me talk about anything and everything. She will encourage me to be weird and different and not just like everyone else. And she will always be the one person whose hugs make me curve my shoulders forward, my sternum sinking back, tension held in my arm, gut died. As a child, I never felt like my stepmother loved me. Oh, she said the words and hugged and kissed me. She went to my school concerts and stayed home from work when I was sick, but I never felt it. I'm almost like my skip ahead. But my children love her unconditionally now, and she loves them back the same way. Isn't that enough that she can give them what she could not give me? Pat texted me today. My loves, go to YouTube and listen to Susan Boyle sing Wild Horses. I dedicate the song to you, no matter what you have written about me in your book. Love to you, my only daughter.
Very, very touching, and it's interesting what the first person to first person does. There's a few things, more things about the Friends of the Chicago Writers Center are a special event. A couple of years is too late for it, sorry. But at the beginning of the season, we have a reception for friends right here on the porch with light, free refreshments. So look for that next year. Also, around week 2, beginning of week 2, we have the book fair. First, we talk to our authors, apply, and then take out Esther Plaza for their books, and we had pretty good results this year. I know the fair was there and sold several books. Coming up, it's not too late to apply for Robert Conceived Favorite Home project. That was founded by Robert Conceived, also Georgia Court, who I see back there. You can apply, and if selected, you get to read your favorite poem, not written by yourself or a close family member, and a short poem, not the Iliad. Okay. And then you get to briefly describe why it's your favorite poem. The deadline for that is July 26th. We also have writing contests for writers of all ages. The deadline for that is July 30th. I did want to put just a plug in for our sister arts, the theater. Their production of Kate Hamill's adaptation of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice with previews on Saturday and it officially opens on Sunday. I haven't seen it yet because it hasn't opened, but I did see Kate Hamill's adaptation of Sensibility down in DC at the Bolger. She did a wonderful theatrical job condensing these complex novels. I did also want to make sure you know that books will be for sale and signing by both our authors. So hang around after the reading and pick up a book. Our next reader, by the way, this is the first time we've had Battle of the Reading or whatever here. In addition to the UPS truck and a while the children's school bus usually drops by. So I appreciate the focus here. Our next author is Clara Silverstein. She's a Boston-based author of the historical novel, Secrets in the House Divided, the memoir, White Girl, The Story of School Desegregation, and 4 nonfiction books. And just a sign of her Renaissance soul is that there are cookbooks and one about a garden. She also has a poetry manuscript circulating. It's just not fair that we have people that talented. Her work has appeared in publications including the Chautauqua Journal, Blackbird, Southern Culture, the Boston Globe, and at Boston City Hall. She is the former director of the Chautauqua Writers Center and teaches writing at Brook Street. She and her family have been coming to Chautauqua since the 1980s. Let's welcome Clara Silverstein.
Thank you so much, Fred, for organizing this series. I also want to give a nod to Mary Jean Miriam, who is the Writers Center founder and my mentor, and now to Soni Toneve, who's the leader now and doing an excellent job. So in this reading, it's mostly poems, but I am looking at history in different ways, personal history and national history. You'll hear quite a few pieces about the Civil War. I was raised in Richmond, Virginia, and that was the capital of the Confederacy, if you don't know that. And so that informs some of what I'm writing about. But I'm starting with a piece of memoir exploring the theme of what is home, called Train Tracks. This train is heading in the wrong direction. I should be traveling south to Richmond, Virginia, after a weekend in New York, not to my home in Boston. I still remember the stops from my childhood: Trenton, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore, Washington, Quantico, Fredericksburg. I picture myself climbing off the train at Richmond's Broad Street station. Under a big dome, long wooden benches curve around an oval centerpiece, studded with lamps. Everything echoes in there. When I was 10, it was an adventure to go to New York to visit my newly remarried grandmother and her husband in their apartment on the Upper East Side. My mother had lived in the city as a graduate student and knew her way around. She confidently led the way to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. As we walked through the Roman galleries, I imagined being Claudia from the mixed-up files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler, running away and temporarily living there. Another day, we went to an automat where it was more fun to put coins in the slot and open a glass door with a plate behind it than to eat the stale turkey sandwich that came out. As a teenager, I learned my way around New York too. Every time I visited my grandparents, I walked uptown to the International Center of Photography in an old brownstone on Fifth Avenue, paying the admission with money I had earned from babysitting. How did each photographer frame the world for what Henri Cartier-Bresson called the decisive moment? I loved the patterns that fire escapes made with their shadows, and the people captured in everyday moments of adjusting a shoe or sipping from a glass. For a souvenir, I bought postcards of black and white photos I liked, brought them home, and taped them to the bookcase behind my desk. These images, couples walking hand in hand in front of Paris boulangeries, carved on rain-flaked cobblestones, mountains reflected by lakes, fed my dreams of one day escaping Richmond and leading an adventurous life. In college, I took the train back and forth to New England. During the 9-hour trip, I leafed through books I never managed to read when they were assigned, ate sandwiches and fruit that I brought with me in a paper sack, and made up stories about the other passengers. I always looked forward to seeing my mom waiting on the platform, her jean skirt and sneakers, unfailingly practical. She'd have my favorite Pepperidge Farm mini rolls, bright orange cheddar cheese, and grape juice waiting for me at home. Every morning, she brought up a banana from the ironing board in the basement. They keep better there, she said. It was just the two of us. My father's life was claimed by heart disease in his early 40s, and my sister was long gone to California. The yellow walls and orange rug in my bedroom offered cheerful refuge from the constant performance of being in college, trying to keep up with the preppies, toning down my enthusiasm because everyone's shrugs made exuberance seem unsophisticated, wondering if my friends would be lovers and my lovers would be friends. Today the train clatters north through stops I never made as a child, through London, Mystic, Providence. By now, I'm used to the landscape of snow, occasionally blotched with mud. I'm moving towards the life I built by scouring out my southern accent. What I took in, the gold dome of Boston State House, red brick sidewalks, twisting waterways and roadways, outlined the path to my adventures. But today I'm looking back down the track. Behind me, home, a tableau of comfort spotlit before going dark. Ahead of me, home. And the rest of what I'll read is poems. They're mostly from a manuscript titled Above the Fall Line. And I've taken workshops here at Chautauqua for exactly 30 years. I can time it to when my daughter was born. And I've really appreciated the chance to learn from so many exemplary poets. Tourist in my hometown. When my mother puts my childhood home in Richmond on the market, I return to wander the lawn. Magnolia blossoms littered like crushed coffee cups. At the apartments under construction, in weeds near the Esso station, where my best friend and I wriggled under the chain link fence after men left for the day, tiptoed up plywood stairs to framed rooms, where we fingered idle drills, table saws, nail guns, blew smoke rings out roughed-in windows, spied on everything we would leave at the houses below. The wire weave of porch screens, sieving the glow of television, families sparring and guffawing. Everything we wanted in the humming edges, where the floodlights died away. I imagine early days of the Virginia colony. Wilderness, brackish marshes, English axes, saws, gangplanks, beasts of burden unloaded to break raw land, city chopped out from a swamp, gospel force, trades of corn for bees, fields fenced, hunter-gatherers turned trespassers, rivers dammed, renamed, smallpox blankets, rum, removal, the king, a villain impeding progress, new nation, sanctity, and thirst. This one, or a slightly different version, was in the Chautauqua Literary Journal. If I were Pocahontas posing for my portrait, England, 1617. This ruff and bodice too tight against my breast. I've already curtsied for King James, already alighted from coaches at mass and entertainment. Hey ho, the wind and the rain, for the rain it raineth every day. I need to quell impatience while the artist takes my measure, his mouth a purse, marsh-colored eyes foolish, as a feather in the hat he pushed onto my head to hide the dark flood of my hair. He thinks I'm no fair lady, but my neck grows thick as a root, upholds me under this brim, curled like the tip of a wave on the crossing I hasten to make. And that quote in there was from Shakespeare, if anybody recognized it. He was a contemporary of Pocahontas. To bake apples, 1760. From the barrel down cellar, choose a Rome beauty. Anoint each slice with a store of sweet butter. Strew sugar upon it, a good thickness. A quarter of nutmeg grated. Roll the crust. Wet the edges. Crimp. Inhale the dear scent. Try not to ache for back home across the heave of water. Give thanks for the harvest, an orchard red and gold. Take the pie down the lane, past thorn bushes etched with frost. Give it to your neighbor. I imagine Abraham Lincoln visiting Richmond, April 1865. And just by way of explanation, that is when the Civil War was about to end, Richmond had fallen into Union hands. The city, fallen, stunned. Ladies in black turn threadbare back to the president, who rushes his Union escort into the Jefferson Davis house, just abandoned, to soldiers who swarmed the team. Lincoln jams unsteady legs under the desk, while his son leans in for the pen, signs his name on a blank sheet, flourished on the L, rests one arm, light as a scarf, on the careworn cloth of his father's collar. The president pleads until grimness takes its customary roost. Outside, ashes rain, smoke sticks in every throat. And in the next one, the next few are sort of like photos from a family album. And an ambrotype is a very old form of photography. Ambrotype. At 17, great-grandpappy Tim, solemn in slouch hat and gray shell jacket in the Carolinas campaign, unsparing path of Sherman. Mustered out, he went back to farming. My grandmother remembers his whiskers, rough as unclaimed wood. Now I want to trace his part of my story. I drive south out of snow by a river named Tar. Downtown's a relic from 1910. The road named after the family leads to a trailer park in a parched field. Nobody looked when I stepped from the car. I was just leaving anyway, following the line of march to Devil's Racetrack Road, where I scuffed the dirt of heritage. And this one is hot off the press. I wrote it last week in John Hossenfeller's workshop here. And it probably will go through some more revisions, but you will definitely recognize the setting. Letter to Great Grandma from Summer Vacation, Chautauqua, New York. The soaring ceiling of this hotel porch, 30 feet above my wicker chair, with brocade cushions of pink peonies, would look familiar to you when you were a girl who wore princess-line dresses and bound your hair with monogrammed silver pins that I keep on my bureau back home. Here, I'm beside a lake, weedy and only 17 miles end to end. You'd have to get here by steamboat, which hoots loud enough to drown out the whistles of cardinals. I'd like to invite you to the opera, though it's sung in English, a drink afterwards. I should warn you, I like a brash Chardonnay. I sometimes order one for myself and sit alone, even though I'm married. I wear clothes that expose my ankle and décolleté. But I think we find something to talk about. I read Edith Wharton and Goethe too. They're not in the original. We're about the same height, so we could stroll arm in arm along the shore as sailboats waltz with clouds. My family was pretty involved in the civil rights movement, not so much with marches and protests, but very involved in desegregation. And we lived in integrated neighborhoods in Chicago for a while when I was little. And the poem is about a photo that we took of our kiddie pool. Kiddie pool, 1965. At 5, I played Ring Around the Rosie with neighbors who raced over. Kids with arms black as a wet street, water beating their hair, while my blonde curls turned stringy, all fell down. When grandmother split open our screen, stepped out, flowered hem bobbing below knees, looked and gasped at water rinsing off us, mixing together, seeping into the lawn, where mother calmly filled a bird bath with the hose and father weeded tomatoes. I thought she pinched her finger, slamming the door. This one is about a trip I took with my class during school desegregation. I was one of the very few white children in the class. Field trip. Oh, and this was to a Civil War battlefield outside Richmond. Field trip. My white face a boulder, too heavy for even the nicest kids in the class to try lifting on the school bus. So I huffed against the cold window, tracing hearts with a forefinger on fog, bangs across my eyes like drawn curtains. Everyone jostling 2 and 3 to a seat, Sly and the family stone crackling from a radio in a coat pocket. Everyone jiving until Mr. Freeman stands, palms forward. Y'all hush up now. At the Maverick Hill battlefield, I stand ashamed among the others. Bones smoothed over, brass stones, then mowed. This is fairly recent history. I think the title will explain the situation. The removal of General Robert E. Lee's statue in Richmond, September 2021. Heedless of his resplendence in the saddle, masked workers chained his bronze boots to hoist his 12 tons, off of plinth, sprayed with a fist, blood on your hands. We just want justice. At Lee Circle, where cobblestones rattled my bike on my way to school. As they turned the winch, Lee was garrulous, rehashing strategies for drills and assemblies. So he looked away when asked about losses. Now he's in a warehouse, forsaken beside a dollhouse, plantation miniature with columns and veranda in storage, and the soft hands of a clock from a grandiose department store that closed decades ago. And as my last poem, it's a very short one, it's meditative and just reminds me of the spirit of Chautauqua, a calm place. I swim through the golden light of leaves reflected, the majesty of branches above me. Turn in confident rhythm, stroke, flutter, glide, through the province of mute swans, not yet migrated. In this season of wild grapes, I take nourishment from tangled ferment, turn my worried breath into a spangled wake of bubbles. Thank you.
There's some very memorable is the sailboats off American clouds. And I think your next cookbook should be a whole collection of poems about different recipes at different times. Just a few words about upcoming literary events. Today at 3:30 in the Hall of Philosophy, the CLSC author of the week, Linda Villarosa, will be speaking about her book, Under the Skin. Next week at the Writers Center, we have two writers in residence. Jennifer Grotz is the poet, will be teaching a workshop on poems of looking. Brandon Billings Noble is teaching a prose, maybe some roses, so a prose workshop, playing with form. And at 3:30 on Sunday in the Hall of Philosophy, both of them will be giving reading from their works. Next week at the Authors Hour, I hope you'll rejoin us if you're around. We have poet Carol Townsend reading from two books of hers, Cinders in My Name and The Color of Shadows. And in a little departure, we will have music next week as well. Composer, pianist Marcia Biasti and soprano Sarah Debian will be presenting some musical settings of poetry by Joe McDougall, who has taught here. So please join us then. And let's give another round of applause for those who do this. Please try to join us next week, and also think about joining the friends. You can find out more as usual at our website, chq.org.